Hi there, I'm Imogen Mellor from PC Gamer, and I am joined by Kerbal Space Program 2's Nate Simpson. Would you like to introduce yourself, Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Simpson. I'm the creative director for KSP2. Nice to meet you.
Wonderful to meet you too. Okay, so Kerbal Space Program 2 coming up, early access, all that jazz. When we talked in early 2020, one of the features you highlighted were the new tutorial videos to teach people how to play. Can you talk a little bit about that, and can you talk about the core systems and which ones will be introduced sort of first, and what we'll be seeing in early access?
One experience that a lot of people had in KSP1, even if they had a pre-existing subject matter interest, everyone's interested in rocketry and explosions, but it really kind of has a reputation as a game that's pretty hard to get into because there's a lot of hardcore science. So one of the big priorities for us going into KSP2 was to re-tutorialize the game. We've created these fully animated, fully interactive tutorials that are meant to teach basic rocketry concepts. On day one of early access, we've got our basic rocketry and our basic orbital mechanics tutorials already in place. This is a thing you're probably going to hear me talk about a lot. We're validating a lot of systems for KSP2. And one of the things we want to learn from early access is how good of a job are these tutorials doing teaching these basic concepts. So we're looking forward to seeing what we find.
Amazing. And can you talk about how you expect to be layering the features in early access? What comes first? Interstellar travel, or colonies, or multiplayer?
So right out of the gate, day one, early access, it's functionally sandbox. What we're doing is validating the basic physics, basic flight systems, vehicle construction, all the things that make Kerbal. Then moving forward, we have these staged rollouts of additional layers of features. The second big rollout is going to be science mode. That'll be our first progression mode that we're bringing into the game that rewards exploration with kind of increasing technology levels and new kinds of parts. And then going forward from that, we have Colonies, which is a big new thing for KSP2. With the colony system, you'll be able to use local resources to build colonies away from the home planet. And then at those colonies, you'll be able to build new vehicles using those local resources. That really opens up gameplay besides the fun of making buildings in space and even in orbit. It also opens up the ability to build extremely large vehicles, which of course will be necessary to unlock the next phase, which is interstellar. We'll be adding new star systems over the course of early access. The first of the new star systems is called the Deb system. You'll only be able to fly across those vast gulfs of interstellar space is with vehicles that tend to be very large, like skyscraper-sized. So you have to build those kind of vehicles on orbit, and you can only do that with a colony system. And then once we've got interstellar in place, we have all the fundamental underpinnings for our complete career equivalent mode. We don't call it career mode, we call it exploration mode in KSP2. We've exchanged currency for resource allocation. So the mature game involves a lot of locating, extracting, processing resources at colonies, which then unlocks new capabilities. New resources can be used to develop new kinds of technology. And then in addition to that, there will be a delivery route system, which I can get into a little bit more later. And once we've got all those things together, we're going to wrap it up with a nice big bow and deliver multiplayer, which is, I think, a thing that a lot of us are very eager to experience. Multiplayer introduces the concept of agencies. So you can work alongside friends within a single agency, contributing to a single space program in a way that's cooperative, but you can also play competitively between agencies, each of which is located at a different location on Kerbin. So with multi-agency play, you can have space races. So we're very, very excited to see all the new kinds of gameplay that emerge from multiplayer.
I honestly, I know my brother's going to try and get me in a Kerbal Space Race, and I'm going to lose badly. So we know Interstellar isn't in the game yet, but can you talk about some of the most advanced and unique parts that are available within the KSP2 build right now?
Sure, yeah. So on day one, probably the biggest change you'll notice from the original KSP, we've added the first of what will eventually be a number of new fuel types. It's liquid hydrogen. There's actually one engine that's carrying over from KSP1 called the NERV engine. It's a nuclear thermal engine. We have converted it to use a more accurate fuel, which is liquid hydrogen, which has its own unique storage challenges associated with it. It's a very low density, very high volume fuel, and you have to use this for interplanetary travel. So we've added another engine now that we have this new fuel at our fingertips, called the Swerve engine, which is a big brother to the NERV engine. And so that makes a little bit of the interplanetary gameplay a little more extensible or approachable. It's a slightly more powerful, slightly more capable engine than the NERV engine. In terms of like what you're likely to, let me rephrase that. In terms of what's likely to change the way you build vehicles most profoundly, procedural wings is definitely a thing that we're experiencing a little bit of a renaissance as a team playing the game ourselves. It really kind of unlocks a lot of possibilities in terms of non-cylindrical structures. In KSP1, pretty much everything is cylinders stuck to cylinders, which works pretty well for rockets, but if you want to get into aircraft or ground vehicle construction, this procedural wing system allows you to modify the shapes and thickness and angles of wings, all different kinds of wing elements. And some of the footage we've shared with you shows some of the truly interesting things you can achieve with this new procedural wing system. So we're pretty excited about that. And then one unexpected change to gameplay that has occurred as a result of a single new part is we have these new automotive vehicular wheels. It's just a large wheel, but somehow that has turned out to open up all kinds of new opportunities around rover race car construction. You can basically make much faster ground vehicles. It has much more suspension travel. And yeah, we're discovering that we're having a lot of fun doing car races. And when I say we, I mean our team, basically at our spare time. We know that the game is getting more fun because we find ourselves playing it outside of normal work hours and enjoying all the mayhem.
Amazing. And I want to know if the Kerbals can do anything new now. Can they do anything they couldn't do before, like funnier faces or like emotes, something?
The funny thing here is that the guy who's responsible for Kerbals and emotes and animations in general is sitting in this room staring at me. So it's going to be hard for me to be too glowing about his contribution to the game, because we don't want anybody on this team to get a big head. But well, the Kerbals have big heads. I don't know. Yes. Actually, there are several ways that Kerbals have become more expressive. The one that I'm having the most fun with right now is that they're subject to flight forces in a way that they weren't before. So in Kerbal Space Program 1, you could see little portraits of the Kerbals and see their reactions to what was taking place in the flight. And we've extended that system. We've also made windows transparent, so you can actually just look in through the front of the vehicle while crazy things are happening to the vehicle. And the Kerbals respond dynamically to lateral forces, G-forces, sudden stops. They're just constantly wobbling around and reacting to stuff. And I've gotten pretty addicted to just moving the camera right up in the window and just jiggling the thing around to just watch them wobble. In addition to that, in the lead up to multiplayer, we'll be seeing a lot more in terms of player controllable emotes, because obviously once we're in multiplayer, Kerbals will be player avatars in a way that they are not in KSP1. So at that point, we'll expect Kerbals to do quite a lot of very funny player-driven things, some of which we've shown already. They can do dances and things like that. That functionality will not be in place on day one of early access, but soon after.
Amazing. And for seasoned Kerbal players, are there any changes right now that they're going to run into and go, thank God, that's so much easier or like better right now?
There are a lot more convenience improvements. Probably the biggest one is time warp under acceleration. So in Kerbal Space Program 1, you're able to accelerate time because some maneuvers take a really long time to achieve. Many of them involve coasting trajectories, especially for interplanetary trajectories. They can take months or even years to get to the destination. In KSP2, when you're using a low thrust engine, which often tend to be the most efficient deep space engines, you may need to burn for a long time, 20 to 40 minutes for an interplanetary burn using the NERV engine, for example. And in KSP1, if you were using a low thrust engine of that kind, you'd start the burn and then you just have to wait for a very, very long time. So we've actually completely overhauled the architecture of the game. So we have what's called a non-elliptical solver now, which is fancy talk for you can now time warp while you are burning an engine. And that actually radically changes the gameplay experience. We think, especially for experienced players who are the ones who are most likely to be doing these long duration interplanetary missions early on in early access, that it's a literal game changer. I talked a little bit about how procedural wings make airplane construction a lot easier. Again, I think if you had the experience of trying to make a wing in KSP1, it involved kind of constructing a structure out of a bunch of little squares and triangles and trying to attach control surfaces, then you could never quite get the angle right, and it's very time-consuming and fiddly. That's all been completely streamlined in a way that not only gives you more options in terms of the final form of the wing, but also is much, much easier to execute. And then in general, the vehicle assembly building is just lovely to navigate now. There's a higher number of parts, but those parts are much easier to find in the part palette. We have a new concept of a workspace. So instead of saving a single vehicle, you save a workspace that involves both your launch vehicle and then any other subassemblies that you happen to be working on in the workspace. Which actually, again, once you get used to it, actually profoundly changes the way you even think about constructing a vehicle, because you can work on all your stages kind of in parallel. Like I have an upper stage over here, and then I have a middle stage, and then I have a lower stage, and I can kind of swap them between workspaces, especially when multiplayer comes online. Things get very interesting in terms of I want to work on, I can specialize in one area of vehicle construction. Like I want to just work on my agency's first stage architecture. Someone else in my agency wants to make rovers or upper stages. We use our workspaces separately, and then we can merge to toss things to each other's workspaces, and then we're working together as a space program. It's very exciting.
And do you expect players to be able to keep their save files through early access into the main game? So can people prep for interstellar travel up till like 1.0 comes out?
So forward compatibility of craft files is a really important thing for us. But early access being early access, all I can express is a strong hope that vehicles that you build on day one of early access will still be forward compatible when we hit 1.0. That is internally a goal that we have. I hope that we achieve it.
And how have the graphics improved in KSP2? Can you tell me about the improvements in the overall presentation, the scatter, the clouds, the terrain? Yeah,
so graphics technology has evolved quite a bit in the 10 years since the original Kerbal Space Program came out. And the improvements are probably too numerous to count. There's the physically based rendering pipeline. The way materials are handled, the way lighting is handled is completely different. We have a new planet shine system that essentially means we're getting bounce light not only from your immediate surroundings, but also from other celestial bodies, which actually has a profound effect. When you're in space, you're often getting interesting incidental light from nearby moons or nearby planets. When you're flying in low orbit above Kerbin, you get that nice Kerbin glow coming up underneath. So the lighting is pretty tremendous. What else? The terrain system is completely new, completely overhauled. It's procedural, which means that it is taking a bunch of interesting elements that we've created and intermixing them in ways that are sometimes even unexpected for us as developers. So what we're discovering is that the process of exploring a new planet results in a lot of surprising new discoveries. Just weird cliff formations, strange mountains, interesting craters. There's so much to run across, that exploration has much more become kind of its own reward. So we're pretty excited about that. Yeah, it's all very pretty.
Yeah, I saw. I mean, if people hear this or watch this, I recommend them going and seeing the show and tell diaries that appear on the YouTube channel, because some of the stuff you see there is just so cool. And what kind of performance should we expect generally? What are we going to be able to crank up? I mean, what are we going to be able to crank up with our CPUs and GPUs?
So the magic word also happens to be a word that I have a lot of trouble saying. I've practiced it several times before this interview. Parallelization. Can you say that word, parallelization?
Parallelization?
Oh, okay. Well, it's hard for me anyway. It's like it feels like I have marbles in my mouth. Yeah, so again, there have been significant advances in multi-threading, multi-core processors over the last 10 years, and we're utilizing a lot of the tools that Unity gives us to parallelize these processes so that they can take place all at once in a way that doesn't impact frame rate. So there's Unity jobs, there's compute jobs, rigid body physics uses a job system, the PQS system uses both CPU and GPU optimization. There's a huge amount of highly technical stuff I could say, but really what it boils down to is we expect the experience on mid-tier machines to improve, so because we want people to be able to build vehicles with high part counts. That's in fact necessary when we get to the interstellar part of the progression. But of course, for every time we make that sort of an improvement, there will be a commensurate improvement for people with the very high-end machines. So if you've got the fancy equipment, it will have a multiplicative effect on the performance of the game. But yes, overall, this is the area where we're seeing the biggest gains week on week in the lead up to early access. The game just gets more performant every day, and we just keep raising our targets in terms of what kind of part counts we want to support. So if you've been watching the footage we've been releasing over the last few months, you've probably noticed footage from 3 months ago, so it can be a little bit herky-jerky in terms of the frame rate, but we're seeing big improvements there.
And how are Colonies going to change how we play Kerbal?
Colonies are going to change everything. Number one, vehicle construction becomes a completely different animal. And I could go a little bit more into construction on orbit in particular. Basically, instead of a vehicle assembly building, you have this kind of open space. It's almost like a star dock from Star Trek. Is that what they're called? Space docks or star docks? Anyway, a place where you could build in zero gravity. So under those circumstances, you can start to make some very, very ambitious stuff. This sort of mothership concept where you have multiple landers attached to the ship, and the purpose of that vehicle is to carry a large amount of mass over a very large distance at a very large speed, but over these kind of long acceleration trajectories, which is yet another reason why we had to completely overhaul our solver so that you can accelerate over years and years as you're crossing interstellar space. Colony gameplay is also about facilitating the collection of resources. And there's a system that works hand in hand with Colonies called the delivery route system. The way that system will work when Colonies are in place is I can set up a colony using prefabricated parts that I've brought to the site on a vehicle. And then the colony can bootstrap itself by constructing its own vehicles, including, let's say, resource extraction rovers. And I can automate those missions. I can drive a resource extractor out to a resource deposit, drill for it, extract it, drive it back, and then turn that into a repeating delivery so that I would continue to receive that resource over time. And then the colony gets the ability to utilize those resources using in situ resource utilization to expand itself. And then the delivery route system does something even cooler, which you can automate the transportation of resources from one colony to another colony. Once you have that capability, you can set up like orbital colonies that are functionally hubs to which you're ferrying resources from multiple star systems even. So it really becomes almost like you are building a little bit of a trade network. And that's pretty exciting for me. And then maybe most importantly, colonies are pretty fun to build. You try to build tall. It's still Kerbal, right? If you build a tower too tall, it's still physical. It'll fall over. You can build bridges. You can build runways. You can build launch complexes. You can build. I intend to build a Star Trek style space dock out of trusses because I want to have the experience of like flying through that. Am I saying it right? Space dock, yeah. Space dock's the one that's like open and looks kind of like skeletal, right? And Star Dock is the big cylindrical one that you're inside of. Whatever. You could probably build both using the colony system. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm excited to see people building. Like when you're building your own base, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How much, especially in a multiplayer context, how much of your personality are you infusing into, your structures?
We noticed Nestor, who was formerly the lead developer of KSP2, is now part of Intercept. Can you tell us how many folks came over from Squad and how they've contributed to KSP2?
Oh yeah, a lot of people came over from Squad. Engineers, artists, producers, and honestly, it's been very helpful to have that veteran perspective. There are problems that I think we avoid because we have that little birdie on our shoulder saying, we tried that several years ago, don't do it like that. And so, yeah, I think if anything, having the Squad people around really helps us avoid stumbling into unforced errors. And also they're lovely people, like we love them. So we don't think of them as Squad anymore. Now we're all together at Intercept, and yeah, they're part of the family.
That's lovely. And finally, my brother, who's a big fan, wanted me to ask about Krakens and have you killed them?
That sounds inhumane. I don't want to say we don't want to kill the Kraken. What we want to do is we would just like the Kraken to keep to itself for the most part, and to explain what your brother is talking about. Because rigid body physics is as cutting edge as it is, a persistent challenge that we've had to deal with over the course of KSP1 is as a vehicle's complexity increases, its tendency to just blow itself to smithereens for no reason also increases. Infamously, one of our designers, Tom Vanita, declared in one of our feature videos that we had slain the Kraken. While I have not seen the Kraken around recently, I am hesitant to say that it has been slain. I think it will always be our white whale, but hopefully the sorts of vehicles that it chooses to eat will have to be significantly more complex. So that's the hope.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.